It is so good to be with you all. I appreciate you all being here tonight. There are so many other places you can be on a Monday night. No. Oh my gosh.
Just at home would be nice too.
It's really nice to be here with you all. I always enjoy coming here and sharing, and I appreciate Mike extending the invitation and helping Mike out a little bit.
Plea? Was it an invitation or a plea?
Well, it was kind of a plea. He goes, you wore him out yesterday, so he needs a little time to recuperate. But I'm glad to do this, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you all again, and to see some of you who I haven't seen for a while, and to share with you something that I just really enjoy. And I stumbled on probably more than a decade and a half ago a different way to approach biblical interpretation, and approaching it through coins. And so tonight and next week, we're going to be looking at using a different method by which to look at the New Testament and enter into it in a little different way, by way of coins or numismatics. It's a great term. You can throw that out there, and a lot of people go, what? But numismatics. The coins, a window into the world of the New Testament. Let's see if I can move us along here. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Can I move it? There we go. I knew I could eventually. I love this quote. The past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. And you could substitute the past by putting in the Bible. The Bible is a foreign country, and they do things very differently there. And so often when we approach the biblical text, we often think those folks are kind of like us and have some of the same issues. They think like us, they act like us, they have the same values as us. Yeah, they wear sandals and bathrobes, but they're just basically like us. But nothing could be further from the truth. And so it takes some time to get into this foreign country because things are so differently. And there are lots of different ways to get into it. And I just want to mention a few of those before we get into the way I want us to get into it. So, first of all, you can get into the biblical world, the background, the context. You can get into it, of course, by archaeology. And there are different areas that you can probe into the archaeological remains of the ancient world in the biblical text. And all of these will help you know the biblical text a little bit better. For example, up on the screen you can see are some carved reliefs, statues, carvings. There are people that is their only focus that they've studied in all that they approach. There are people who are pottery experts. They can see a little bitty tiny fragment and go, oh, well, of course, that comes from the Mamlukan period, and they go on and on and on and on. Or, of course, excavating. Those of you who were on the travel with us, you saw lots of excavated sites. You saw the remains, typically foundations and the stones that are there. So archaeology is a really good way to get into and set the context for getting into the foreign country of the biblical world. Another way, and that is you can read ancient writers. There are writers who are writing just before the time of the New Testament, during the time of the New Testament, and just after the time of the New Testament, and they often give us a very good sense of the world around the New Testament. There's a wonderful series out there called the Loeb Classical Series. If it has a green book, it means it was written in Greek. If it has a red cover to it, it means it was written in Latin. And there are hundreds and hundreds of these. This one is Josephus. If you want to know kind of what is going on in the first century world, Josephus is a great book to pick up. But you could pick up Josephus, you could pick up Roman historians such as Suetonius or Tacitus. You could pick up humorous writers who are satirists such as Juvenal. And they all give you a little bit of flavor of the time. So that's another way you could get into this. You could get into the background by reading folks like that. Also, ancient writings. This is a little bit different. Ancient writings, it's like this little fragment. We have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of these fragments. And you know what these are? These are tax receipts. That's right. They're keeping track of their taxes. And you think it's bad today, they were doing the same thing 2,000 years ago.
What was their marginal rate?
Oh, we actually know that. We do. We know the rate that they would charge for fish or for produce. Tax records. We have these tax records. They're fascinating for some folks. And they collate them and they figure out, well, in this particular time in Egypt, here's what the percentage rate was that people were paying on toll taxes as they come through. And so, and we have marriage contracts. We have real estate contracts. All of them are really quite interesting. And we even have little fragments of letters that someone might write to someone and say, will you take my pigs to the market? And then a letter back saying, I see you took my pigs to the market and they died on the way. I mean, we have those kind of letters that give you a little bit of everyday kind of experiences. So that's another way you can get into the biblical world. It gives you a little bit more sense of what is happening. But of course, tonight, where we're going, coinage. One of the reasons that I think that coins can be such a fascinating way to get into the background of the biblical world is because they were, I love this word, ubiquitous. They are everywhere. Everywhere in the ancient world. They were minted by the millions. And so while someone might write, like these writers such as Josephus, he's going to write for a very small percentage of the population. And tax records, well, they're going to be for the learned people who are writing and keeping track of things. But the coins, it touches everybody. And so you have a lot of these. And they are portable, they're mobile, and they contained an immense amount of propaganda. It's a message. I mean, all you do is pick out a contemporary coin out of your pocket, and every one of them is trying to give you some kind of message. And just a little narrative aside, so much of our coinage is actually heir to what went on 2,000 years ago. Some of the images are exactly the ones you would find on coins 2,000 years ago. And isn't it interesting on our coinage, e pluribus unum? It's Latin. Why are we using Latin? Well, because they did 2,000 years ago on their coins. And so we're heirs of a lot of that. But these coins can be a revelation into understanding the biblical text. Not just understanding the biblical text where money is mentioned. My good friend and colleague, Mike Graves, need to mention him tonight. He at one point he goes, well, you know, I told him I was working on this book, and I have a couple of contracts out on books I'm working on in relationship to biblical studies and coins. He goes, how can you do a whole book on that? He goes, because he goes, there aren't that many references, to coins. I said, it's not just references to coins, it's how coins tell you something about that environment that's going on. Some things that are implied, symbols on coins, you find symbols in the biblical text. And so we went through some examples with him. And so it's much broader than just looking at the biblical text and looking at those places where you find references to coins. Well, we can look at some of those, but there are some other places that we can explore. And we'll do that with a couple of examples tonight. And I should say at this point, if you have questions, go ahead and stop me at some point. You may have some questions. I tried to anticipate some, but there's a lot of questions that might pop up in your mind when it comes to this particular approach to the biblical world. Let me just say this before we move on. That is, this is a recent new approach to looking at the biblical text. First of all, it's a hard field to get into. It's very complex. It is broad. There's a lot of specialized people in it, and it's kind of hard to kind of break into it to kind of understand it, to bring it over to the biblical text. But since about 2020, a new, really over the last 5, 6, 7 years, a new approach for the Society of Biblical Literature meeting, which is the major kind of group associated with biblical studies, is promoting this. And so it's nice to be a part of that, this kind of new wave. But let me go ahead and give you a little bit of background, some things that would be just good to keep in your mind generally about coins, ancient coins, and then we'll get into looking at some examples. All right, first of all, the material. Gold coins. These are the ones you would love to have. Basically, when this is, coins were done in precious metals. One of the precious metals, the most precious metal, is gold. And this particular coin, one of the things you can keep in mind when you see any coin, some of the terms I'll be using, we often talk about this being heads and tails. Technical term, obverse. This is the obverse. This is the reverse. So I'll be using those terms tonight, and you'll see them up on the screen, heads, tails. This is such a perfect example of what you will find on many, many Roman coins. And that is, on the obverse is almost always a portrait of a particular ruler at that particular time. Here, it's pretty easy, even if you're not really good at Latin. I think you can figure this out. Nero, there you go. You all know Latin. Didn't even know that. Typically on the obverse, you will have the emperor, and you will have a series of his titles. Now, these aren't that many. Caesar, Augustus, Imprimatur. So just 3 titles he has on there. We'll see another example here where it just goes on and on and on and on and on. On the reverse, you will often have the part of the propaganda they're wanting to get across. So they're going to use a god, a goddess. They're going to use some scene that is of special, perhaps historical significance that they're trying to get across. And then there will be some more, sometimes titles. Here's a few more titles, and then the name of the god. So this is a pretty typical kind of coin that you will find. The material of gold is then followed by the material of silver coins. These, I'm giving these to you in the frequency you would find them. Coins that are gold, you're not going to find as many of those. You're going to find more silver coins. This particular silver coin is minted about 300 years earlier than the gold coin. Show you the big difference. This is another thing about coinage. They have a long shelf life. A long shelf life. There would be people in Jesus' time who would be using coins that would have been used 200 years earlier. That would be like you and I going in to buy an iPod and using something that has King George III on it. I mean, that's the long shelf life. This particular coin is minted in silver. At this point, a ruler, Alexander. This is Alexander the Great. You can see he's got his name here because it's not Latin, it's going to be Greek. He has it in Greek. But you're always going to be associated with some kind of god. And so we have a god that looks like he's worked out a little bit. It looks like he's in pretty good shape. This is Zeus sitting on a throne. So Zeus, association with Alexander. And Alexander, who's also wanting to associate himself with any other god he can, liked to associate himself with Hercules. And one of the acts of Hercules was killing this incredible lion. So what you see, this is the lion's mane. There's the lion. He's wearing it. He has killed it and he is wearing it. So everything you see on a coin has a meaning behind it. Sometimes we don't always know what they are. You see the circle, we see some little monograms here underneath the chair. We see what looks like an axe. We don't always know what all of those are. They may be marks to tell you where it was minted, maybe about who engraved it, but some of these things we simply don't know. But silver, an extremely prevalent material that you could find everywhere. Yes? Uh-huh.
I don't see a denomination.
Yes. Yes. We're going to come to the denominations because they do have a pretty precise one. But it would always depend upon where you are. The Greeks had a different denomination designation than the Romans did. It's kind of like we have dollars versus pesos. And in the ancient world, you had lots of different denominations out there, so this is where money changers come in, trying to make the equivalence between them. But I'll give you a little chart that kind of illustrates at least one type of denomination for the Roman Empire. Bronze. This is a bronze coin. Common material, mixture of copper and tin, and when we get to looking at our brothers and sisters in Judea who were minting coins, this is what they minted because it's cheap, less expensive to make. Now, some of these bronze coins, and we're talking about denominations, there's a huge one, and you can put a lot of pictures and scenes on it. So look at this scene. Here we have the emperor proclaiming. We have the Praetorian Guards here. You can see their shields. You can see their aquillas, little eagles up on top, their helmets. I mean, this is an incredible scene. We have his little judgment seat behind him. And on the front, notice all of his titles. In fact, there's so many titles, what he has to do is we have to abbreviate. So it's Latin abbreviated, so we have AVG for Augustus. Some of these are spelled all the way out, but sometimes they're simply abbreviated. So gold, silver, and bronze. These are the main kinds of material that you'll have. Oops, let me go back one. Jumped, my finger jumped. Now, production of coins. How did they do this? We actually have a coin that illustrates it. We have a coin that shows people making coins. It's wonderful. This is a coin that was produced during the time of the Roman Republic. So this is the time before Caesar Augustus, the time of Julius Caesar and earlier. And so what we have here on the front, or on the obverse, we have the god Juno Moneta. Does that look familiar to you?
Money.
Yeah, that's money. It also means mint or money. And what happened was, in Rome, the goddess Juno, this temple became associated with the mint. In fact, the minting for Roman coins, many of them were done right here at this temple. And so this goddess, by association, gets associated with the mint and is called Juno Momenta. Now, on the reverse, these are the tools for minting a coin. You would have the anvil, the die, the tongs, and the hammer. That's all you need. Pretty simple, pretty primitive. Imagine you're cranking out millions of these. A lot of manual labor. Now, in this day and age, you can see a name up here that's kind of hard to read. This is the name of the moneyer who minted this. At this particular time in the Republic, there would be certain individuals who would take over the responsibility. I guess we would call a person kind of like Treasury Secretary today. And that person would be in charge of making sure that the mint was putting out the amount of money that would be needed, coins for, especially if a war was going on, more coins would be needed. But these are the tools that they would use. Let me give you a little bit more example of how they would go about this. Oops, wrong way. Okay. Okay, here's a picture of how they would put this production together. You can see what they would do is, these would be the blanks. The blanks would be placed here, a die on top, and then here are the coins that have already been minted, be placed over here, someone holding it with the tongs, and someone hitting it with a hammer. Slaves. They are the ones who would have done all of this particular work. Let me give you a little bit closer up of showing you how this would have worked. What you would have the punch here, the reverse die, the blank, the obverse die, and of course the anvil here, and then striking it up on the top would put the image on it. So one after another, after another.
Who made the blanks?
They would make the blanks. So the blanks would be made, these blank.
So you get gold, poured it in
How'd they get the gold and the silver? Almost all the gold, all the silver, these were, first of all, these were mined by slaves. There were silver mines, several in Spain, but scattered around they would have these mines that would mine and refine the gold. What they would typically do is they would pour in these molds, they would pour the gold or the silver so that you would have blanks, 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 and blanks. In fact, we even have some examples of where you can kind of see them hooked together. And then they would chop them apart. And then you could use them as a blank. After you had melted the gold, refined it, poured it into these forms, got the blanks, then you could start the process of striking the coin. Now, what you're seeing here is extremely rare. In fact, it is so rare that would be my entire salary for a year. That's what that sold for. Now, either my salary's very low. Actually, this is a Roman imperial die. Now, these are very rare to have discovered because, one, they kept extreme count of these. When they would wear out, they would be destroyed, and they would wear out. So it's very odd that you would find something like this. Now, what's interesting in this particular die, this one was done, this one has the image of Tiberius. So Tiberius was done during his reign, 14 to 37. So this is actually during the time of Jesus, and it was used to make denarius, which are silver. And what happens here is actually the silver blank is stuck in the die. So the die would be carved, and so it would be hollow, so it would make an impression, but you can see this is raised. And so this is a silver blank that was put in there, stamped, and got stuck, and who knows through history why it wasn't destroyed. The die somehow survived, but when this went up for auction in 2018, it was sold for $50,000. So
where is it?
I do not know who purchased it.
A person, though.
It looks like a person purchased it. Yeah, we'll talk about the idea of purchasing coins and some of the implications for that. But this particular die was very expensive. Now, here's another die. Probably a forgery. Now, let me tell you, counterfeit coins, they aren't just today. Back then, they did it. And now, if you got caught, it was pretty serious offense. But if you look at this counterfeit, and it probably was a counterfeit from this day and age, you can see where the engraver, and the engraver has a name, he's called a cellator. A cellator, you can see how it's hollowed, they've carved it out, and you have an eagle here, here are the wings, he's on a stand, and these are standards that were used by the Roman legions. This is a denarius that was minted during the time of Mark Antony. His legionnaires, they minted these by the hundreds and thousands and millions to pay the legion. And evidently someone tried to capitalize on it using what they believe is probably a forgery here. But I thought it was a good example so that you could see how they had engraved it. Now, some of the engraving that is done is incredible. It is artwork par excellence. Some of the engraving, looks like it was done by a fourth grader. It's not too good.
And it would wear out, too.
And it would wear out, exactly. Brand new die, stamped, it's going to give you a very fresh impression. After you've knocked out 10,000, it's getting worn, so the impression is not as crisp and not as clear.
Why do they think it's a forgery?
Well, first of all, why do they think it's a forgery? I think one of the reasons is because when you are looking at it, it just doesn't have the refined detail that is typically found in coins. Also, because there are just so few of the authentic ones that have ever been found. As I was doing my research, it looks like they can only really verify that there have been 12 authentic dies that have ever survived. So if these dies have survived like this, it's probably more likely that they might have been a forgery and hidden away. Yeah.
Did they heat the blanks before they started?
It's a good question. The question was, did they heat the the blanks before they struck them. And there are two schools of thought, as there is on everything, two schools of thought. And they've done experiments both ways with it. Some believe that they were cold struck. Others believe they heated them and they were struck that way. I really don't know.
Well, we didn't see a forge.
No, there wasn't a forge. Those examples were being struck, cold struck. But some people have raised the question about if there was heat applied so that they're a little bit more malleable. And it may depend upon the particular the metal that's being used, whether it was gold, whether it was silver, or whether it was bronze. So we don't know exactly. It could be either way. Sometimes if we're talking about fakes, oftentimes what they would do, they're fakes. What they would sometimes do is they would take a cheap metal like iron. They would use something like this, make an iron slug, and then take a very thin layer of silver and coat it and pass it off. So what people got wised up to that. So what they would do is you would see that people would make a punch on it, and it's called a banker's mark. And it's a way to kind of stamp down through it to say, oh, okay, it's fake or it's not fake. If you have one, you can, especially if it's worn, you can really see the underneath core very, very easily whenever that patina, that very thin layer of silver has worn off. Well, let me answer the question, or a couple of questions about, first of all, maybe size. How big were these coins? And they did vary in size. The most frequently mentioned coin in the New Testament, and probably the most widely distributed coin in circulation, was the denarius. And so if you want to see what size the denarius is, it would be comparable to the penny, Now, if you want to talk about denominations for the Greeks, these are the denominations that the Greeks used. Drachmas, and this would be a tetradrachma, 4, the 2, and the 1. So you can kind of see the relative size here to the penny. Now, for the Romans, here's the Roman denominations. They had 10. Now, we're just talking about the Romans. Realize the Persians had coins they were minting, and I'll talk about all the little cities could mint coins. This is just the Roman official mints, minting these particular. The largest, sestertius. This is that big coin that you could really get a good image on the back of it. These are, they're basically bronze, but they have a little bit of extra metals added into it. But basically they function like bronze, but you have your sestertius, your dupontis, your as, semis, and quadrans, which is the smallest of the bronze coins. The most popular, again, the denarius is the most frequently probably mentioned and utilized. But what always fascinated me was you have this huge bronze coin. I mean, they are good size and they're thick. They're very heavy and thick. For example, this could weigh 30 grams. You come down here, your denarius is 2 to 4 grams. So that is what? That's almost 10 times heavier. But it takes 4 of those to make one of these.
Now, is that the same size denarius as you had on was it the Greek one?
Yeah, the penny. Yeah, it's
So it's the same size as the penny?
yeah, be the same size as the penny. So this is going to be a little smaller. This is a little smaller, and this is a little smaller also than the denarius. The denarius and the arius, the Greek coin, those would be the same size of a penny.
Could you give us a kind of an example? Would Darius buy me a chicken, or would it buy me a horse, or a biscuit? What do you think?
Well, that's a really good question, and we actually do have some list, almost like a menu,
Yeah.
where for a donkey, for travel, for these kinds of things, we kind of got a sense of how much barley you can get, how much wheat you might be able to get. In the biblical world, in the biblical text, it is suggested that a denarius would be equivalent to 1 day's wage. So it's a day's wage. And then from that point on, it would be broken out to how much you could spend for bread, wine, those kinds of things. But basically, one
Of a laborer.
of a laborer, of someone who is laboring. Yes. If I can find that list, I'll try to bring that list next week, because you might be interested to see what certain things cost. I'll remind myself. Yeah.
In the last 4 years, what a loaf of bread the cost has changed dramatically.
Yes.
Is there that kind of change
Oh yes.
also?
Oh yes.
So if you have a list, it might be at a certain point.
It is only a certain point in time. And what happens is they tried to manipulate the monetary system back then just like we did today. Okay, so what happens when your denarius here is 2.2 to 4 grams of silver? What happens when you start mixing a little bit more of a lesser expensive metal into it? They begin to devalue it. So it became too expensive to make this, and so you would put more, you would devalue it. So there is a way that you could make it lighter, so you're not putting as much silver into it. And so all the way throughout Roman history, there's manipulation of the system and trying to figure out, sometimes the silver's devalued or it's made less. Then a new emperor comes in and says, no, we're going to bring it back to the standard that it was. It's kind of like the United States. Are we on the gold standard or are we on the silver standard? They were doing some of the same things with some of their coins also.
And inflation as well, too. If you're saying they're pounding out more by mercenaries than flooding the market.
That's right. That's right. And it would depend upon where you would flood the market for. Here's a good example. In the biblical world, in the world of Jesus, in his time, there were very few denarii in Jerusalem or in Judea. They didn't exist. It was only after 68, 69, and 70, when the Roman legions came in, that the denarii started to be widely circulated in Judea. So whenever we have stories in the biblical text with Jesus and others talking about denarii, 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 they might be using a term, as I'm writing, in 68, 70, 80, or 90, I'm using a term that's now popular but wouldn't have been in Jesus' day.
So what did they use in Jesus' name?
They would use several different things. They would use, for example, that leads to my very next point.
But I could help.
Thank you. what they would do is they would use coins that were minted more locally. These are called Roman provincial coinage. And if you look here, every little dot here is a place that minted coins. Hundreds of them. All these cities, little cities unto themselves, are minting coins. So these coins minted in these cities could circulate and be used. Let me take you and show you a little bit more refined picture here. Let's look here. These are just the places that were minted in around Judea. So Gaza, Ascalon, Jerusalem, Caesarea Maritima, some of these places that we went to, Sidon, Tyre, Caesarea Paneas, all of these places, Tiberias, they can mint coins. And so these are some of the coins that would be circulating in a more localized place. Now, Antioch. Antioch was 3 major cities in the Roman Empire, big cities: Rome, Alexandria, Antioch. Antioch was a large city, and they had a large mint there. And so many silver coins were minted here and could then circulate down through here. So, but once the Romans came in, especially with the legions, and they had to pay the legionnaires, then denarii started circulating more and more in this region.
Was it the denarii in Gaul were the same as one? In Judea, was there any sort of centralized control by the emperor as to
Centralized control of the
the value from one far reach of the empire to the
there was they did try to centralize some of the value of the denarius. So if you were in Jerusalem, and it's 90 AD or AD CE, a denarius there and a denarius in Great Britain, they would have approximately the same weight, and they would be valued the same. Now, the question is, how much is that worth in relationship to a coin minted by the city of Apamea?
That would seem to be almost, not only were they an army, but economically then they come in with the strength and they then define the exchange rate. In a way to dominate then the economy was, no, I'm sorry, but 10 of your local coins are no longer enough for a denarii.
That's right. And this is why the weighing of coins was very important. They still would use these scales. So, I have bronze coins here. I have silver coins here. I have a silver coin here that is 2.4 grams. I have a silver coin here minted in Antioch. They're approximately the same weight. So I can give you some of the same value for it.
Could I just set up shop and just start, it seems to me they'd have to have sanctioned or blessed by the Caesar, wouldn't they? Or do I just go be an entrepreneur and I just start banging these things out myself?
Every city is going to have, all these cities here that are mint cities, they're going to have a local person who is directly responsible for the minting of this coin. Usually it's a kind of counselor who is specially designated, who's going to be minting these coins, but he can only mint those in relationship to, again, the images that the emperor supports. Now, that's very true for the obverse. On the reverse, they can put anything on the obverse they want. And let me give you an example.
I mean, the reverse.
On the reverse. So here is an example. Oops. So here's an example. Okay. Here is a local coin. It's not minted by the imperial, it's not minted by the official Roman mints, but a local city. And the city, I've got its name right here. It's a little city called Apamea. And on the front, we have the emperor. course, you're going to always have the emperor because you want to stay in good stead with him. This is an emperor by the name of Gordian III, and this is minted somewhere around 250, 260. But remember, on the reverse, you could put anything you want. And typically what they would put on the reverse is something related to the local history and local environment. Like if you were minting a coin here, we would probably put something on it like,
Burn ends.
there you go, there you go. Yeah, Chiefs. You put the Chiefs. If we were in St. Louis, we'd put the arch. I mean, all those kinds of things. So I want you to look what they put on this coin. So here's a basket. 2 people are in the basket. Can you see what that is right there?
Bird.
And what's it having?
Piece.
Olive branch.
Olive branch, a little. That's Moses. I mean, that's Noah. That's Noah. That's Noah and his wife. So here is a city that believed it was near the mountains. It believed that Moses, this ark, had come to rest upon its mountain. And so to symbolize that, it created, and in fact, it's really worn, but this would have been the abbreviation for Noah. So they minted a coin in 250. This is a pagan coin, but they minted it related to Noah and his wife and the ark.
What are the other 2 figures?
Yeah, these 2 figures here, in all likelihood, we mentioned you just can't anybody set up shop and do this. These are the magistrates who would have been responsible for minting these coins. They put their names on it. Yeah, well, you know, it's one of the things that they did. So here we have the magistrate, back Kios, and so that's probably kind of a picture of him and who he is. So yeah, it's an interesting thing that they would do on local issues.
David, just a question about the culture.
Mhm.
Would coinage have a tendency to be more an aspect of the metropolitan culture and bartering still be in the countryside to some extent?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and I think that's an accurate assessment. Notice that these coins, these are provincial coins, and so they're minted in the local city, and they would have kept their circulation mainly within the city or within a fairly short kind of area within the city. However, coins were very mobile, and so they would make their way out into the countryside, into different places. We know, from some of Jesus's interactions when he's talking to people out in the rural area of Galilee, he makes references to coins, and so it's not something that they would be unfamiliar with. But yes, definitely the cities are the places that these would most kind of occur. Well, Roman imperial coinage. This is different than the provincial. These are the official mints of Rome, and so they're in the big cities like what would be London and Lyon and Alexandria, these kind of places. Those are the more official mints, and these would circulate in a broader way versus the more localized coinage of the cities. Well, let me take you to some specific coins in relationship to Judea, the area we're most interested in here. The Judean kingdom before Jesus. How did you know you made it as a ruler? You minted coins. That's the way you would do it. If you could mint a coin, that was your number one way to say you had power. And so there was this little 100-year period that Judea was an independent kingdom. The previous kingdom, the Seleucids, had weakened and fallen away. Now, Seleucids, they minted their own coins. That's a whole nother group minting coins. But between the Seleucids and the Romans, the Judeans had their own little kingdom. And to show that we are powerful, this dynasty called the Hasmoneans began to mint coins. And this is a perfect example of what they did. They're bronze, they're small, they're cheap, in a sense they're easy to make, relatively inexpensive to make, and they last for a long time. Because this particular coin, notice, it was minted by a man by the name of Alexander Junius. It was minted from 104 to 76 BCE. But when we talk about the widow's mite, this is the coin. This would have been the coin. So it's over 100 years old. This little widow throwing in her widow's mite. They're the smallest coins available, very small pocket change, very small. But there's something interesting that is illustrated in this minting. First of all, this represents a diadem, a crown. What you see between each one of these in these spots, that is Paleo-Hebrew. So these are Hebrew letters in here. This side has the anchor, and it also has lettering, but it's Greek. So what you have is a bilingual coin, which tells you, yeah, I'm Jewish, well, I'm pretty Greek. And that's what they were saying. I'm just like a Hellenistic king. I'm just like Alexander. I'm just like the Seleucids, the Ptolemies. I stand in that lineage. Yes, we're Jewish, and so here's the Jewish, but here's the Greek. Now, the one thing that they were always careful not to do, though, no images. They picked symbols that would be inoffensive to the Jewish population. That's typically what they did. There were one or two exceptions, and they're interesting ones, but this is very typically what they would do. Just some kind of symbol, like an anchor, that would be unobtrusive. Now, Hasmoneans, they ran up against the Herodians. Herod the Great. You have the Hasmonean dynasty. You have Herod the Great, who's supported by Rome. There's this conflict, and if you've got conflict, what do? Mint coins. That's what you do. It's the way you show. What we do today, we print, we make bumper stickers and posters and banners. They did the same thing, but they did it with coins. So this is the last Hasmonean ruler, 40 to 37 BCE. He's in deep trouble. In fact, he has gone over to basically the Parthians, the Persians, to ask them for help. Herod's gone to the Romans to ask them for help as they're fighting this war. Look what he puts on his coins. This is a table. Oh, first of all, it's not engraved very well, is it? No, you can tell they don't have skilled professional engravers doing this, like in Rome. But this is the show table, where the bread, sacred bread, would be on top of it in the temple. And you know what this is. The menorah. So what do you do if you want to get people on your side? You have them, you come up with the nationalistic symbols to stir people up. The menorah, yes. The shewbread, yes. Fight for us, for our homeland. Herod the Great, what does he put on his coins? This is a shield. This helmet. He has the militaristic symbols on his because this is who I am. Powerful. And of course, as we know, eventually, yes, Herod takes the kingdom. But the coins actually kind of demonstrate that.
What are they made of?
These are bronze. Once again, these are made of bronze. And another reason why they aren't in perfect shape, part of it is the composition of the soil in Judea. It does not preserve the coins well. And so you will often have these coins looking very worn and hard to read. For example, even though, because we know from other coins, that this is kind of hard to see, but would be a beta and an alpha. This is supposed to say king. So in Greek, he is proclaiming his kingship. Herod is doing the same thing. Beta, alpha, sigma. This says Basileia, King Herod. King Herod. And so both of them are proclaiming themselves king, but of course we can only have one king. Other questions that you might have? Well, where I want to go, and I didn't get through everything I wanted to get through, but that's okay. I'm going to go to, next week what we'll do is, we're going to look at some biblical text. And we're going to see how these biblical texts and the coins from this time period can give us some background to reinterpret this passage in a little different way. So we're going to look at John 6, 4-15, and see, well, what coins can help us understand this particular passage. And we'll also look at a few other passages, and we'll also look at perhaps the one book where there are more symbols than anywhere else, and that's Revelation. Every symbol you find in Revelation, you can find on coins. Every one. Serpents, horses, rainbows, thrones, crowns, winged creatures. Everything. It's there. And my thesis is simple. Rome had the monopoly on propaganda and getting their theology out via coins. John was countering it with writing Revelation. He takes some of the same symbols, but to use an image, he overstamps them. So he's taking those images and stamping them and saying, here's the real image. So we'll look at some of those images in Revelation in relationship to coins too. So next week we'll kind of get into the background of how you can apply this to the biblical text. But for tonight, I'll be faithful to our time and let you all go. Blessings upon you all, and thanks again for being here. Look forward to see you all next week.
Great stuff.